Hello everyone, I hope you're taking it easy and your day has been great thus far. For this video we'll be going through an unboxing and review of Ironhide. And Ironhide is part of the Deluxe class sizing of the Studio Series line. In fact, he is figure number 84 of the line. And this particular incarnation of Ironhide is per the Transformers Bumblebee movie. As for when this figure was released, I believe it was a 2022 release, given that he hasn't been sitting in my backlog for too long. So it's definitely been within the last few months, so it's definitely 2022. And in terms of who's releasing it, this is pretty much a combo of Hasbro and Takara Tomy, or at least Hasbro for the Western audiences. So keeping up with the Transformers Bumblebee line, trying to knock out the line as best as I can so I can move on to some of the other Transformer content. So here we have Ironhide. Definitely looking really cool. Definitely looking very Ironhide-y. If anything, it's definitely the red. So here we have the front of the box for Ironhide, number 84 of the Studio Series line, I believe. Yes. Long gone is the plastic little covering, so we do get to see straight into Ironhide, who is already in his robot mode. Side of the box, so Studio Series 84 Deluxe class, the CGI of Ironhide, at least his head and the top of his torso. And then we have a bit more of a fuller shot of his CGI artwork. Top of the box, pretty much just the Transformers Bumblebee movie logo. Turn to the back of the box. Robot mode, vehicle mode, 22 steps of conversion. He will have a backdrop included, and starting to recognize that backdrop a lot now. It will be the standard backdrop that has accompanied all the Transformers Bumblebee unboxings and reviews that I've done thus far. But I'm beginning to think that it probably is the same backdrop used for any figure coming out of the Bumblebee movie. But that's okay. It's not a problem at all. I mean, we've seen it within a core scale through the likes of Shockwave and Ravage. Seen it in the deluxe scale through Ironhide, B127, RC. And we obviously saw it at the Voyager scale through, who was the Voyager that I did? Blitzwing. So that's that. So that's a quick look of around the box. So what I'll do from here on in is open up the box, pull out Ironhide, and then we'll go through a bit of the review steps. And with everything now out of the box, so we have naturally the figure of Ironhide. We have a single weapon accessory, the instruction manual, and we do have the fake cutout, as well as the actual real background cutout. So if I take the fake one away for the time being, so obviously we have seen the general style of the Studio Series type backdrops, and I feel for some reason this one seems to be unfolding itself. Not sure how and why, but it is. Now, I have mentioned this already, the backdrop is pretty much the same when it comes to the Transformers Bumblebee figures, so I wish I could say there was something really cool and fancy about it, but I really can't, at least for the ones that I've looked at so far. Now, in terms of Ironhide, in his little scene, so just as a bit of an indication, just to have a rough idea of what to expect. It definitely actually doesn't look that bad. It does look quite in place with it. I will try and have a few shots of Ironhide within the scenic background as well on things like my Instagram. So that's Ironhide in his little scenic backdrop. So putting the backdrop to one side. So Ironhide, let's put you up here momentarily. Let's move your weapon over here as well. Now, in terms of the manual. So here we have the manual for Ironhide. As we saw from the back of the box, it will be about 22 steps to convert him from robot to alt mode and back. So the front of the manual and the first few instructions just covering where his weapon can be mounted. So obviously he can hold it within his hand. I suspect that'll be in either hand. And the weapon can also be stored on his back, which is actually quite cool. As for the rest of Ironhide, so his transformation process doesn't look too bad. So that's the first 10 steps. So hands away, and then a few things with the main torso, tucking away his feet, things like that. So that's steps 1 through to 10. How much of these steps can I get on? And then there's steps through 11 through to 16. So by step 16 we look to have about half his vehicle mode already done. 17, 18 will continue at least the back end of it, which I suspect will probably from his legs. And then step 19, pretty much folding everything over and tabbing things in nicely. Well, hopefully things will tab in nicely. I think some of the reviews I've done in the past, some figures have had some things tab in very nicely, others have not had anything tab in very nicely, and then there's been a few where there just wasn't even tabs. And then lastly we can add his weapon in his vehicle mode, which actually doesn't look too bad. Looks a little clunky, but definitely doesn't look that bad. So that was the manual. As for the accessory, so we just have the single one solid accessory, basically a very large, I don't even know if I can call it a handgun because I would expect a handgun to be half that size, but definitely a very solid looking blaster, not to be confused with blaster. In terms of equipping it, since I have his hand right there, so that weapon will very nicely slot into the hand. And what about the other hand? Yes. So Ironhide can demonstrate a good level of ambidexterity and have the weapon in either hand. And as we saw from the manual, he can also have that attached to his back, which I believe is this little peg here. And there you go. That's the weapon attached to the back of Ironhide, which I think is actually really cool. You don't see a lot of weapon stores in robot mode. Beast Wars is obviously one thing, but seeing it in more of your mainstay right now, unless it's a built-in concealed weapon, you don't often see that. So it's actually very cool when you can actually do that, and it seems actually quite within character / concept. So that was the accessory, which I'm trying to pull off, but I am managing to transform in. So that is that. It's also in the one flat color. So accessory done. In terms of Ironhide, what do we have here? So Ironhide, front of Ironhide, sporting some very nice red and grey, a little bit of black here and there. The windows are the translucent blue kind, which does make me wonder how much of this torso area is basically all of that blue, just simply painted over. We also have some silver apps throughout. That's the front of Ironhide. The side, the back, general absence of back kibble, always a good thing. The other side, top down, bottom up, and Ironhide on a bit of an angle. Will he stand on his own 2 feet? The answer is yes. Yes, he will. So from a visual perspective, his robot mode is looking very nice. I would say it has been a solid translation from screen to figure. I'm sure some of the paint apps could be better, but still a deluxe class toy. It is still of a standard price point, so one can only expect so much. Now, I have noticed that, especially since getting him out of the box, his legs, more so at the hips, they feel loose. So if I do that, so the leg itself is failing to stay up. I mean, this one hasn't been too bad. It's only just come down because I made it do it, but there you go. Both legs are basically flopping on their own / gravity. So for my one, they seem a bit weak. Well, weak / loose. Hopefully it's not a flaw of the Ironhide toy, because I know, well, I believe the Ratchet toy is basically a redeco of the same mold. So hopefully it's not a failing of the actual mold. But I will say his knees seem quite solid, so knees is always a good thing, but definitely keep that in mind. I've noticed that a little bit throughout the reviews so far. Now, let's have a look at articulation before we move on too much further. So we've already covered a quick look of him from different angles, talked about his colors, already have a bit of a grievance with his waist. So articulation, his head, full 360. Now I did just notice the back of his head does have that translucent type blue, so if you were to stick a light source directly behind his head, that should actually light up his eyes very nicely. So that's the head articulation. Now I don't know why I want to do a full 360, but you can. In terms of his arms, yes, they can do a 360 as well. Be a little bit careful. It does feel like it impacts with some parts of the body. It's not encumbered by it, but you will roughly feel that brushing of some of those parts over each other. So that's the arm, well, the shoulder joint doing a full 360. In terms of the arm will go all the way out that way. And that's basically it from the shoulder perspective. If I can hold that, will it do a... So yes, the arm itself can do a full 360 at this particular joint, which is really cool. In terms of the elbow, so the elbow will do solid 90 degrees to the front, putting it back into normal, and surprisingly it can pretty much close to do the same in reverse towards the back. Not sure why, but it can be done. So that's the shoulder, the upper arm, including the rotation, the elbows. There's no real more movement there. Now the wrist will slide back into the forearm like that. I wouldn't exactly call it articulation because that is part of his transformation as well. So nice that he has the movement there, but it's also not necessarily standard movement. Won't repeat the same thing on the other arm. One would expect it does the same thing. In terms of his waist, he can pretty much do a full 360 at the waist, much like the 360 at the shoulders. Just be careful, you can feel it, not in a major bad way, but you can feel it just brushing up against other parts of the body. But that being said, he can do the 360 at the waist. Now, in terms of the legs at the hip, leg can go all the way to the front, leg can go all the way back down, leg can go all the way to the back, leg can go all the way to the side, which basically means Ironhide can indeed do the full splits. He can do a full 360 at the actual hip to waist connection as well. Why you would do it, I do actually wonder why. We've already established that his legs can go out to the side and back to the middle. Now if I hold on to this upper leg very carefully, his leg can do a full 360 as well at the upper leg, so where the red and the grey basically separate, there is that connection in there to help facilitate that 360. Just reset his legs ever so slightly. His knee. So his knee is pretty functional, so his knees can basically do that. So if we were to move his leg forward and bend his knee in full, that is basically what that will look like. And there's only the one action on the knee, unfortunately. You can't bend the knee in reverse. In terms of his feet, there is a little bit of side to side. A little, not a lot. Like previous things, I suspect that's an artifact of his transformation. I mean, he can also go front to back as well. It will look a little bit clunky because some extra parts will move with it, but Ironhide does seem to have a little bit of flexibility in the sense of what he can do with his feet. And even this black piece that juts out, it's not that bad really. So yes, there you go. The feet have some degree of articulation and mobility. So we've covered visual aesthetics, we've now covered articulation. So overall, Ironhide actually has a fairly solid robot mode. The articulation is pretty good, which hopefully means that he can do some unique and different poses without flopping around too much. Now, some poses, we'll have to see how it goes. He could have an element of top heaviness. He doesn't feel top heavy, but it's something to always keep in mind. I know I already talked about the absence of back kibble, which is always good, so looking at that is always nice. So there's nothing just randomly packed away in his back. So now that we've had a look at his robot mode, his articulation, his colors, I will now attempt the 22-step transformation into his alt mode. Then we can have a quick look at his alt mode, and I will close off with some final thoughts on Ironhide. And now with Ironhide in his alt mode. If you've never transformed Ironhide, or Ratchet for that matter, the first transformation will probably be the longest. It's the legs is basically what threw me off. The arms actually wasn't too bad in the upper body, but it was getting the legs into the right alignment for everything to basically fold over and tab over. I think that will probably be my major call out in the transformation is, yeah, the legs. The legs are very particular. But once you figure it out, it's actually not that bad. And I suspect as I transform him backwards and forwards, it will become a lot more intuitive. So yes, I would almost recommend for the first time around, feel free to use the instructions. It's why they're there. So here we have Ironhide in his alt mode. So front of his alt mode, side, the back, the other side, the top down, the bottom up, and a bit of a angled shot. I suspect he's supposed to be some type of Cybertronian van of some description, but I will definitely say, after the transformation has been figured out, he does tab quite nicely. So in terms of major tab locations, he'll have some tabbing between his torso into his legs, through this grey bit here. Has some 2 solid tabs there. Got a little bit of tabbing of his chest piece into forming the top of his vehicle mode, and some of the other tabbing of note is the tabbing of these bits of his shoulders into his, I believe that's the top of his legs. Naturally there's some tabbing on these side flaps going into the side of his vehicle mode, and he even has a little bit of tabbing in his forearms as well. So once tabbed in, he actually does feel quite solid. That's actually really cool. Now before we get too carried away, in terms of his weapon, we do know it can be attached, and that's pretty much it. And to be honest, it actually doesn't look too bad. Yes, it still looks like a vehicle with a giant gun mounted to it, and I guess technically what is a tank, but it actually doesn't look too bad. And I'm just wondering, because it's a Cybertronian vehicle, it's not in the traditional conventional take of a Earth-based vehicle mode, that it looks a lot more, I say, palatable. But that is Ironhide with his weapon attached in his vehicle mode. In terms of what his vehicle mode can do, so he does have 4 functional wheels, so he can pretty much go front and back, not a problem. In terms of other articulation, that's about the extent of the articulation within his vehicle mode. So he's definitely not designed to have a lot of moving parts in his vehicle mode. He is, at the end of the day, I dare say, a Cybertronian pickup truck. So yes, he will only really have the main movement in his wheels. The color apps haven't changed all that much, but we do get a nice little bit of yellow now coming through on his side. That it was loosely hinted at within his robot mode, but it does come out not a little bit better, a lot more better within his vehicle mode. Otherwise the greys are the same, the blacks are the same, the blue, the red, the silver, etc. So all is good. So visually pretty solid. Transformation, I've already had my little commentary about that. Articulation we have covered. Weapon we've had a look at. Yeah, and it's actually, it does have some good detailing in his vehicle mode as well, which is really cool. It's a very solid vehicle mode once you figure out how to get there. So that is that. So we've had a look at his robot mode, his vehicle mode. Final thoughts. I'll just put Ironhide there for the time being. So robot mode, starting with the, I dare say, the criticisms. So for my particular version of Ironhide, I did find his waist connection into his upper thighs a bit on the weak/loose side. Hopefully it's not an issue with the mold itself. Hopefully, well, good for others, not so much me. It's just specific to my unit of Ironhide. Otherwise, from a robot mode perspective, everything else is pretty solid. The colors were quite nice. Articulation was quite solid and good, and that'll probably become a lot more evident when I do some of the photos and the shorts. I quite like the fact that he could store his weapon at the back of his robot mode. Lack of a kibble, well, lack of back kibble, always a good thing. So from a robot mode perspective, I thought it was quite solid, bar the one grievance with the upper leg/torso. As for his vehicle mode, everything tabs in very nicely. Colors are still the same, so I won't talk too much about that. It's definitely a very unique looking alt mode, which is half the novelty, and I think that's one of the positives of the Bumblebee line, is being able to see some of these Cybertronian takes on things and actually really enjoy the look and aesthetic, especially given that in the movie most of them didn't really go through an actual Cybertron in alt mode. Tabbing I've already mentioned a few times, which is really good. So overall, I would actually say his alt mode is probably quite sturdy, quite enjoyable. Even having the weapon on it's actually not too bad. The transformation, as I mentioned earlier, be very careful getting the legs in the right alignment. I think that really underpins a lot. The back section is mainly the back, the shoulders, the arms. They're not too bad. They are very much one trick pony type thing. But getting those legs, because you have to fold them in a bit, spin them around, spin the whole joint around, flip them around to compact them. I think if you're not doing it right, you'll get a little bit confused and then wonder why this part doesn't actually hook on to that. I will also mention that the two legs, because it happens on a lot of other figures, the two legs don't actually join together. They do stay separate. There is one step in the manual that suggests that it could actually have the two legs come together, but sadly they do not. But once you get that torso tabs into each leg, it is quite sturdy. So that is the thoughts on the vehicle mode. Overall, I quite like the look of Ironhide. His colours are good. Both his robot mode and alt mode are good. His transformation will eventually grow on me. That's a given. I think I had similar issues doing Blitzwing as well. It's probably why I actually avoid some of the Voyagers and the Deluxes, because some have been good, some have been really weird curveballs. As I mentioned in previous videos, if you're a fan of the Bumblebee movie, which I think did quite well, grabbing Ironhide is probably a given. If you appreciated the Autobots from the Bumblebee movie, grabbing Ironhide is a given. If you like Ironhide is a given. I do like how they have gone back to more of his G1 aesthetics than maintaining some of his aesthetics from the first few Michael Bay instances of the Transformer films. So it's definitely a nice callback to see him back in his traditional red and greys. So it's definitely very nice. I do know the 86 Ironhide is going to be released in the near future. I'll probably do a bit of a combined photo shoot. I think they're different scales though. This Ironhide was a Deluxe. I think the 86 one might be a Voyager. But either way, it's no big hassle. I'll definitely do the two together when the time comes. So that will pretty much bring to an end the unboxing and review of Studio Series Ironhide from Transformers Bumblebee movie. I'd definitely say, if you're in a position to grab him, definitely pick one up. He's been, bar his transformation, the other parts of it have been quite enjoyable to have a bit of a play with. Hopefully this video is slightly shorter, but probably not by much. Thank you very much for watching this unboxing and review video. Feel free to leave a like, a comment, subscribe if you enjoyed the content. All of this does help support the channel and I do greatly appreciate it. Extra content can also be found on my Instagram account, link below. Stay safe and take care, and I will catch you all in a future video, whether it's another Transformers video or a video covering some of the other content on my channel. See ya.